The Imitation Nation podcast covers all things counterfeit, hosted by Shabir Imber-Safdar of the Partnership for Safe Medicines and Sven Bergman of Venture Global. All statements are their own and not the opinions of their employers. In episode 25 of Imitation Nation, Sven and I interview an old friend, Travis Johnson of the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition. We talk about the things that Congress needs to do this year to make everything safer for Americans, and what he's seen as far as trends and upcoming issues in the world. Check it out. All right. Today we have an old friend who's not actually old, but we've been friends a long time, Travis Johnson from the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition. And Travis, thank you for joining us on Imitation Nation.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Good to see you, friend.
Yeah, I mean, Sven and I have been like, oh, we got to get Travis on. We got to get Travis on. So we talk to you all the time, but like getting you on the show was actually.
I am frequently in high demand. So,
so let's just start out with the basics. I don't know that everybody knows what IACC is, which is much more fun to say than the full name of the organization. Give us an introduction to that and your role.
All right. Well, you were correct to point out International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition barely fits on my business cards, but IACC, we were founded a little over 40 years ago, back in 1979. Initially was a small group of brands, mostly in the apparel luxury goods sector, that came together to advocate for the enactment of the first federal level criminal trademark counterfeiting statute. So it took a few years to get it done. Was enacted in 1984, but they had such a good time doing it that they decided they would keep the band together and keep on working on. Obviously, as things have changed over the years, there need to be updates, and technology changes. The sort of problems that brands are facing change. So the organization's really been instrumental over the years in making sure that the law sort of keeps pace with changing circumstances. So whether it was the Anti-Counterfeiting Consumer Protection Act in the early 90s, the Stop Counterfeiting in Manufactured Goods Act back in 2006. That was the one of my first projects working at the IACC. Had been begun by one of my predecessors. So I got to let him do all of the heavy lifting, and I got to take a little bit of the credit. A couple of years after that was the Pro IP Act. And I've been with the organization now for a little over 20 years. Had my 20-year anniversary last year, last November. And my role with IACC is largely focused on our advocacy portfolio, so legislative, regulatory affairs, and sort of overseeing our overall engagement with U.S. government and international partners as well.
That's awesome.
I think that's how I know you is mostly policy. But for people who are not familiar, if you are the maker of, say, shock tools, as an example, vertical, you might come to the IACC because you guys actually execute anti-counterfeiting projects together in an aggregate where a bunch of people can actually get a lot of work done and also communicate about effectiveness together in ways that you would be more effective than if you were just doing it by yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The advocacy piece is sort of my primary focus, but the organization does quite a bit more than that. We tend to think of ourselves as sort of a more practicality focused organization, really sort of a group that is interested in dealing with the issues where the rubber meets the road. We've got a few in-house enforcement programs that have been running for quite some time. The first major one was the Rogue Block program. That's Rogue, ROGUE block program. Very difficult to misunderstand. Many people still refer to it as the Roadblock program, but that's a collaboration that we started up around 2010, 2011 with some partners in the credit card and payment sector, really focused on, sort of a follow the money approach and, sort of demonetizing, counterfeit traffickers, so that, they were unable to profit. It's, I think, the online issues are, certainly a bigger priority for hard goods manufacturers and the brands that we work with over the past couple of decades. We didn't have to deal with those problems quite as early as, some of the folks in the copyright sectors, because, uh, you can't really download a handbag or a pair of shoes or,
Right.
auto parts or pharmaceuticals. So, and the folks that are actually producing and shipping those products, they do want to be paid for them. It's not sort of the file sharing model that sort of originated on the copyright side. So
Right.
we've continued to build on those partnerships over the years. We have a China-focused program that we've been running with the Alibaba Group for almost as long as the Roadblock program's been running. That's been really beneficial to a lot of our members, both large and small. I think the lion's share of the folks who have really benefited from it tend to be the SMEs, the smaller businesses, a lot of independent entrepreneurs who a lot of times really just don't know where to start. They don't have the resources that a lot of the big guys do.
Yeah.
So, in addition to the enforcement programs, we also do a lot of law enforcement training, a lot of customs training. Typically do at least 2 a month, throughout the year, and bounce around from port to port. There's 300 plus ports across the country, so plenty to choose from. So do a lot of work with customs in that regard, as well as with state and local law enforcement, where I think a lot of people don't realize a lot of the IP enforcement, a lot of the anti-counterfeiting work actually gets done at the state and local level.
Right.
There's only so much bandwidth and so much resources available for federal law enforcement, federal prosecutors. So it's important to make sure that that's part of the that's part of the solution that we're working on. So.
No, that's awesome. And Travis, by the way, so Travis and I go back a while. One of the first things he and I worked together, for the company I was still within at the time, we used your law enforcement trainings quite a bit and the port training. So they're fantastic. So I'll throw a shout out there for IACC. That's up for any brand owner that wants to make sure their stuff is being stopped at the border and train law enforcement to recognize counterfeit. Terrific program. And then how Travis and I interacted for the very first time briefly was when SOPA PIPA was going through Congress. That was the first attempt trying to, I know we all have PTSD from it, but so that kind of awoke the sleeping giants, that awoke the large search engines to like, oh, government affairs is important. And they did a day where they blacked out the internet. And so everything had like a big censor bar over it, like Wiki pages was down, Google was down. And that's how Travis and I
vaguely recall
the fastest dying bill I've ever seen. I think we lost like 10 co-sponsors an hour after that. Anyways, so Travis, amazing what you guys all do. When you kind of look towards what's going on in the IP space, counterfeiting space right now, what are the biggest issues you see your members are dealing with in their fight against counterfeits? What's the biggest issues you see?
You just mentioned the technology interactions and the all of those things, and I don't want to sound like a Luddite, but I think a lot of the issues that we hear about from our members really tie back into just the incredible change in the landscape that has been taking place over the past couple of decades. A lot of technology driven issues. You go back 30 years or so. And I don't remember, know if you recall what websites looked back in the, looked like back in the mid 90s or so. So back then, the most of the brands that we deal with, it was primarily a brick and mortar issue. Retail outlets, flea markets, street vendors. The counterfeits that were coming into the country, it was almost exclusively large, ocean-going cargo, container ships. So the product was coming in very large volumes, but also, in a manner that was, a little bit easier to target and interdict. And when you did make a seizure, you were making a big impact because you were taking a
Right.
lot of product out of the supply chain. Back then it was also primarily apparel, luxury goods, the sort of things that, even now when I, tell people that I work in, counterfeiting or, anti-counterfeiting,
Right.
their mind pretty much immediately goes to, fake watches, fake handbags, that sort of thing. It's, really just amazing though, kind of, what a difference a couple of decades make, because just about everything that we saw back then, a lot of it is still continuing. Obviously, the apparel and luxury goods, still make up a large portion of, what, law enforcement and customs sees every year. But a lot of differences in terms of the production of the goods. I don't want to say the quality of the goods, because
Right.
quite frankly, even the ones that are convincing fakes and look more realistic, look like the authentic items, a lot of them are obviously very poorly made and frequently packed full of all sorts of bad things that you really don't want to have anything to do with. Uh, I'd say the membership of the ICC also sort of reflects those changes that have taken place over the years, because we are obviously still have quite a few folks from the apparel and luxury goods sectors,
Right.
but representation now in our membership is really every industry sector you can think of, like automotive, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, personal care, food and beverage, which usually shocks and scares a lot of people.
Yeah.
Obviously, probably don't really want to be eating or drinking or putting on your skin something that was produced in a completely unregulated environment by somebody who has every incentive to do it the cheapest way they possibly can. So a lot of changes in distribution chains as well. Particularly with sort of the rise of e-commerce.
Right.
We see still plenty of goods coming in by the cargo container, but a lot of the product is going direct to consumer via mail, small package shipments, things like that. The dollar value of seizures by customs, sort of year after year, seems to be pretty level in terms of what's seized in the cargo context, what's seized in small package context, but the number of seizures that are taking
Right.
place and the quantity of the product, the small package environment far outstrips what we're seeing in the customs or the cargo environment, and
Yep.
for obvious reasons. You got one or two items in a package versus literally thousands of items in a cargo container.
To your point, it would be really interesting. Shabir and I covered it on the podcast multiple times, is how basically you're getting rid of de minimis, not only the US, but also the EU next year, how that will shift it. Because, we moved from, you and I know it, when you and I started working on this stuff, we had like 200, 300 million parcels coming in a year. That then exploded up to 1.4 billion here, 4 billion parcels in the EU. That's just physically impossible to investigate. That's physically impossible to inspect.
It makes it difficult for the advocacy side as well, because when you get into big numbers like that, most people cannot wrap their head around those sorts of volumes, whether it's the volume of the goods, the value of the goods that are involved, the level of harm that's being done to both companies, legitimate companies, and to consumers. When you get into once you hit 6 to 9 zeros after the first number, you get into 3 comma range, then it's a difficult problem to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
No.
Well, you mentioned advocacy, and one of the things I love about IACC is that it's really, in my time, and I've been doing this, I guess it's a little over a decade now, IACC has been a convener of advocacy at the federal level for more than just its members, right? Like IACC is basically a champion for fighting counterfeits and enacting policy that helps, reduce our exposure to that danger. So granted, this is a weird time to be working in federal affairs and congressional policy.
That's one way of putting it.
But, what are the top 3 things that you have on your list that you would love to see Congress get done this year?
It's a good question. Obviously, sort of, we're at the halfway point or past the halfway point, in the current Congress. And with this being an election year, we're really working with a very short timeline. There's a very limited calendar, to try and, make some progress on some of the things. We're keeping an eye on a lot of bills that are floating out there, or legislation that's been proposed that is probably not something that they're going to get to this year, but sort of laying the groundwork for for future years, and next Congress, and maybe the Congress after that, the Congress after that. I think most of those are really focused on issues related to supply chain security, transparency, enhancing coordination between public and private sector, both public cooperation and public private cooperation. And then, sort of, looking at ways that we can, expand legal authority and give, whether it's, customs or, law enforcement, other law enforcement agencies, sort of practical tools to address a lot of the problems that we're seeing today and have been seeing for many years, and will continue to see, absent some big changes. So.
I think there's one I want to talk about, but about the info sharing that you've been working on, and you've been my champion for a while. But before we get there, when you talk about new authorities, can you give me an example of how that would work?
I was going to say, well, one initiative that we were involved in, not super extensively, but it's something that we've been following, and certainly keeping an eye on implementation of, and again intersecting with some of the issues that our brands are experiencing in e-commerce. Was the Informed Consumers Act that passed a couple of years ago. We saw the first significant enforcement action under that bill about middle of last year, and focused on sort of oversight and vetting of third party sellers in e-commerce, and I think importantly, and a thing that probably doesn't get as much attention as it ought to, is providing some additional transparency for consumers so that they can make informed choices and smart choices when they're shopping online. I don't think anybody thinks or wants people to stop buying products online, but we want them to do it smartly, and have the assurance that when they are doing that, they're getting what they've really bargained for.
So give me an example of if I'm on an e-commerce site, what is the Inform Act changed for me as a consumer in terms of what I would see or what I would have access to?
Well, historically, online sales have been sort of typified by anonymity. If there's somebody that set up a website, it's very difficult, particularly in a post GDPR world, where website registrant information is very difficult to come by. Mostly hidden behind proxies. In the e-commerce context, though, with online marketplaces, what we've seen is that a lot of consumers really don't connect the dots, that they're not buying necessarily directly from the platform whose name they know and recognize. They may be buying from another individual, and historically there hasn't been a whole lot of transparency with respect to who that individual is, where they're located, how they're sourcing their products. So Inform provided some sort of baseline standards for platforms to adopt in terms of their onboarding and vetting of sellers once they have crossed a certain threshold, and are considered to be a high volume seller, and when they cross that threshold, the platforms are now required to provide identifying information, right there on the product page, on the listing page, so that an individual can see, maybe it's not, XYZ platform, it's, another person who's located in a jurisdiction that may be, widely seen as a major supplier of counterfeit product, or
Yeah.
other sorts of illicit goods. So the additional information that is available to consumers under the act, and I know the sponsors behind the bill are currently taking a look at what's working, what's not working. I think there's historically been some criticism about maybe there should be some adjustments to the threshold of what constitutes a high volume seller. Certainly some concerns about the capacity for enforcement under the bill. Right now, it's limited to the Federal Trade Commission or state attorneys general to actually undertake the enforcement. You know, Not surprisingly,
Yeah.
most government agencies have limitations on the resources and their own bandwidth. So the level of enforcement that has taken place thus far, I think, has not risen to the level that a lot of people
Yeah.
would like to see. But something that's continues to be looked at, and where there are opportunities to improve or enhance that, I think we should absolutely take them. So, you
I've
go.
experienced this myself where I bought something online on a major e-commerce platform, and it's a product made by a company that's well known. And I didn't feel like I was adequately allowed to see that it was being sold by another third party.
Yeah.
And so the fact that they will have to both vet that third party and then show me information once they become a high volume seller, I'm really, as a consumer, I'm really grateful for your work in this area.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let me ask about my favorite topic, and it's the one that you and I talk the most about, which is the concept of info sharing between uh, customs officials and brand holders.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to set up an example, and then I'd like you to walk me through the problem and then the solution for the info sharing here.
Sure.
And if I give the example wrong, you can stop me and I'll do it over again. But let's say that there is a port, and into the port flows a trademarked product. Let's call it a luxury watch.
Mhm.
And the customs person looks at it and maybe has solid reason to believe that it is a counterfeit product. My hope is that in that situation, they would pass along the information to the trademark holder for that watch, where it came from, what the package looks like, what the counterfeit looks like, all the customs information, who was the broker, where was it shipped from? Did it pass through other ports first? Because obviously the customs job gets better the more that you take the counterfeiters out, and the people who have the resources to do that are the trademark holders. Does that not happen today?
It does, but not to the extent that we would like to see. There is existing authority for customs to work with trademark copyright owners in the IP enforcement context, and that's really been the historical model, is, and for good reason. You have literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of different types of products, not just brands, but individual products within the brands. There's zero possibility that your average customs official working in the port is going to be able to maintain expertise and authenticating every product across the board. It's kind of a limited subset, because typically enforcement is restricted to marks that have been recorded with customs. But even when you factor that in, there's still about 30,000 marks or so that are included in CBP's recordation database, and it's kind of a multi-step process. At the point of detention, where there's the products have been identified, there's a red flag that something seems a little bit off. CBP has the authority to share limited import information, so things like the port of entry, the date of entry, quantity of the goods, um, and can also share pictures of the product and its packaging.
Right.
Sometimes, though, there are items that are on the product or the packaging, or additional data points that might be useful and helping the rights holder to make that authentication and to do it quickly, because you're talking about just massive volumes of product that are moving through the ports every day. Uh, it's not in legitimate brands' interests to have those held up when they are legitimate shipments.
Yeah.
So you want to make a quick and efficient termination. Um, Unfortunately, going back several years, there's been this question about whether or not the Trade Secrets Act applies to these circumstances. The current thinking on the government side is that CBP would be restricted from disclosing information unless it is sort of explicitly spelled out in the statutes or the regulations. So if the regulations don't say that CBP can share serial numbers that are on the product, that might be a really good indicator for a brand to say, no, that doesn't match the format that we use for our product labeling, or even things like particularly in the small package environment, shipping invoices, packing slips, those sort of things that might include additional information about where the shipment originated, sort of who is ultimately behind the importation, and CBP's inability to share that under current law really serves to hinder the ability of rights holders to provide the assistance that might help them do their job a little quicker and a little more accurately. Obviously we don't want legitimate trade held up, but we also want to make sure that we're catching as much of the bad stuff as possible.
Right.
So that's an area that we've been focusing on for quite some time, and have some legislation that's pending that we're I'm not an optimistic person generally, as I think both of you are well aware, but it's something that we've been working on for a while, and I think we are in a much better position this year to hopefully make some progress on that. Uh, I know you are aware, but the listeners may not be. There's companion bills, both in the one in the House, one in the Senate. On the Senate side, it's was introduced by Senator Grassley, who's been championing this issue for years. The House side is being led by Blake Moore, congressman from Utah, along with Brad Schneider from Illinois. The bills are sort of aimed at sort of clarifying and expanding CBP's authority, both with respect to the the scope of the information that they can share, the various data points that might not currently be authorized under existing statutes and regs. But not just the scope of the information they could share, but the scope of the stakeholders that they can share it with. The rules as they currently stand, were written in sort of an earlier time when the way that products were being imported and distributed was not quite meshing with what we currently experience. So in many cases, CBP might want to be able to reach out to, if they open up a package and there's a shipping invoice or packing slip that indicates that it originated with a particular e-commerce platform or website or something like that. Right now, there's, I think, a big question mark, and when there's a big question mark, the typical answer is better safe than sorry. We're not going to disclose. So they may not be able to reach out to the e-commerce platform or an individual, another stakeholder who would have the ability to quickly tell them, no, this is definitely a bad shipment, or, we have good reason, to support that this is actually, authentic product. And, the limitation, that we're dealing with at the moment, I think just, decreases the efficiency and decreases the accuracy of enforcement at the border.
Yeah, and public-private partnerships are huge, right? It's the government can't do everything. We can't fund the government to do everything, but like that fake watch could be one of 100 packages with fake watches that all have in them uh, a shipping invoice that says, thank you for buying from fakewatchesrs.com.
Mm-hmm.
And the watchmaker really wants to know that they exist and could tell customs that everything with that piece of paper is a fake.
Yeah.
and yet, like, if they can't share it, they're really hampered, and they can't actually go shut down Fake Watches R Us as easily because they don't know about all of those instances of counterfeit shipments.
Yep. And
I'm very excited. So I'm assuming you're looking for companies and advocacy groups to sign on to letters of endorsement, as we did as part of the Partnership for Safe Medicines.
Yes, we are. I mean, we've made a lot of headway in the House this year thus far. We had committee markup in Ways and Means Committee back in December. That went very, very well. Was reported favorably by the committee. On a 40-0 vote. So love to see a unanimous vote, especially when it is in our favor. So. The bipartisan sponsorship and the bipartisan nature of the committee vote is fantastic to see. I think bodes well for further progress. We are gearing up to hopefully get a vote on the House floor and get it through. Earlier versions of the bill, have already passed in the Senate on at least 2 separate occasions. So fairly confident that, if we can, get some traction and get some momentum going in the House and, get it through there, that, the Senate will be, ready to take it up and, hopefully, get it on the president's desk before too long and, certainly before the end of the year. So,
yeah. But it would be fantastic. Again, this is one of the things, Travis, you and I have been working on this, because it had been fixed at one point in time, but there was a sunset with it. So it kind of came back and just for all the folks that listen to it and sometimes think that CBP might be unreasonable not to share it. Just when you read the statute that currently exists under the Trade Secrets Act, because it wasn't clearly defined, if an officer decides to I really like XYZ brand, I'm going to take a picture of shipping labels so they can investigate. If that violates the Trade Secrets Act, that officer himself is exposed to a year of jail time, right? That's the penalty that is that by sharing what's defined as a trade secret. I don't blame an officer for saying, I'm not doing that until I'm sure that I don't end up a year in jail and $10,000 fine. So
and loss of employment.
And loss of employment.
Yeah, certainly not an outcome that we want to see. We certainly want our partners at CBP to do their job, but we also certainly understand that they can't always do everything we would like them to be able to do. But that is the position we're in at the moment. So doing everything we can to help them out and in the process help our brands out, help consumers out by getting that new authority in place.
So for any brand owner that's listening, I think that we can, and you guys want to get involved in it, send Shabir and I a DM or whatever message or a comment. We'll make sure we connect you with Travis, because if that's an issue where hey, we want to get involved, I think IACC would always love the support of more brand owners.
I usually don't like you speaking for me, but I will agree with you on this point. So yeah.
Where is Travis? Tell people who want to get more involved or learn about IACC. Maybe they're a brand that wants to participate in your brand protection activities, or they want to participate in the advocacy, which you can do without even having to join IACC, although you should. Where can they find you online?
Our website is very simple, iacc.org. Also, you'll feel like I should put in a plug. We've got a conference coming up end of April, April 28th to 30th the Conrad in Orlando.
Nice.
Great site. We've got a full agenda is available online on our website, as well as my contact information. Would encourage anybody to feel free to reach out directly. A lot of the work that we do, is essentially limited to members only. Some of the enforcement programs, are restricted to members. But that said, a lot of the work that we do, and as you mentioned, sort of at the outset, we are try to be as much of a big tent organization as we can. Our law enforcement and customs trainings are open to non-members as well. But happy to have as many people involved. I mean, the whole thinking behind putting the organization together in the first place was that this is a problem that none of us are going to be able to solve on our own. It's why we have really leaned in over the past decade or so, to these voluntary collaborative partnerships. Sometimes even with folks that historically we may not have seen eye to eye with on a number of issues, but I think there's particularly with the way that the landscape has developed over the years. We've had a constant challenge with siloing of information, or one hand not knowing what the other is doing, and I think sort of bringing everybody together and having the conversations that need to be had, and sharing information, to go back to the bill, are all keys to actually making some real progress on these issues. So
awesome. With that, Travis, I appreciate your partnership for such a long time. You always, whenever stuff happens in DC, either somebody from my team or I will call you first, because I know that you will always have the inside track on what's going on, and I really appreciate your partnership. Again, a plug again, check out ICC.org, great organization. And with that, Shabir, read us out.
The Imitation Nation podcast is a production of Cause Stories and is the sole owner of this production. Podcast production by Elizabeth Rude. Podcast management by Sarah Imber Safdar. Theme music written by Jonathan Boyle.